person doesn't have a home, that's foundational to their well-being. How many people do you know that have a substance use disorder that live in a home? They're an alcoholic that live in a home. I know state legislators that have substance use disorders that live in homes. We're not talking about them. We fundamentally in our society need to think differently about how we view housing, and instead of being a commodity, thinking about it as foundational. So many of the challenges that we heard and frustrations and fears and concerns that we heard from you tonight, all the whole public, underneath all of that is the ability to have housing. And we're in a different situation now than we were 30 years ago. Just as an example, and when we have cities across Washington state where the vast majority of them, 75% of their land use area is zoned single family only, meaning middle housing like duplexes, triplexes, row houses, cottages, accessory dwelling units, tiny houses for your grandparents to live in and age in place on your property cannot be built. That precludes a lot of additional housing options.
A few moments later.
And all of these challenges and all of these concerns about safety, about mental health, about substance use disorder, if a person doesn't have a home, that's foundational to their well-being. How many people do you know that have a substance use disorder that live in a home? They're an alcoholic that live in a home. I know state legislators that have substance use disorders that live in homes. We're not talking about them. We're talking about the people living in abject poverty on the corner that don't have a home. We also need to increase our public safety net and substance use disorder treatment and options for people that do want to get in recovery, absolutely. Someone made a comment about forcing people into treatment. Washington state law, we cannot force an individual into treatment. That's illegal for a lot of really good reasons. If a person is dangerous to themselves or others because of their substance use disorder, in very, very, very small cases, they can actually be forced into treatment, but that's not something that is allowed.
So I'm a local resident and employee of downtown. I actually work and live across the street from both buildings. And consistently, I fear for my safety. I also fear for my coworkers and the customers that come into our store. Consistently, we have found needles in our parking lot. We have also found drug paraphernalia, and I personally have been threatened, as well as learning about consistent issues of stabbings in the near area. It was an issue a couple months ago. Thankfully, it hasn't been a recent issue. But consistently, I do fear for my safety. I find that there isn't enough being done in the downtown area, and I think that not enough people who are in power are walking around and spending their time in downtown to actually see and experience it themselves. I think that's a real problem. I think also that I attended the homelessness response workshop, and I learned a lot of great things, but I didn't learn how we're going to fix it or how we're going to approach the issues. So hopefully come January, you guys will finally enact a plan, but it kind of left us off on what's going on next. And I'd like to know more about that. If there's resources for that, that would be great. I think that in terms of finding solutions to these problems, one thing that worked really well was closing the well. I find that a lot of crime and instances of violence have kind of decreased in our area of work and where I live. And I think that that was a great idea. Now we need to do something with it. But things like that are solutions to this huge problem that we're experiencing. I also think that the homelessness issue is kind of covering up the real problem of drug abuse. And when I attended the homelessness workshop, there was a lot of talk about how it's homelessness, and I understand that that's an issue, but along with that, it brings drug abuse, it brings crime, it brings just a slew of issues to our area. And I love Olympia. I grew up here. I really don't want it to turn into trash, but it's starting to look like Seattle, and Seattle is trash. And it would just be awesome if you guys would do something. Soon would be great, but that homelessness issue, it's really drug problems. It's literally, there are needles at my feet. And we even had a kid pick up a needle in our parking lot and bring it up to us. Another one last thing is that I know that there were a lot of topics and a lot of statistics that were mentioned at that workshop I think that they were not appropriate to what the real big issue is. Thank you.
If a person doesn't have a home, that's foundational to their well-being. I mean, how many people do you know that have a substance use disorder that live in a home? They're an alcoholic that live in a home. I know state legislators that have substance use disorders that live in homes. We're not talking about them.
My name is Renee Dars, and I love Olympia. I was going to discuss with you tonight laws and ordinances that are being broke on a daily basis, but I thought instead I would share my last week. I was at Ralph's the other night, pulling into a parking spot. Actually, it was during the daytime, and I had somebody bang on my window while I was still in motion, demanding that I give him money. A few days later, I was at Value Village. My husband is sick. I am sick, and we are on a meager budget. Christmas is already tough, and they broke into my car and they stole the gifts I bought. My sister-in-law was missing. She is 4 foot 10 inches tall and weighs 85 pounds. She was missing for a few hours. We were worried because we know what's going on in this city. Eventually she was found, and she is safe. Because I love my city, because we love our city, I will come back here and I will speak until I have no voice left. I will come back again and again. I have questions and comments. Are you aware that people are told not to come to these council meetings because it's unsafe and it puts a target on their back? Tell me if those people, the thieves, the lawbreakers, are they required to lock up their guns into safes like the rest of us? Or are they exempt from those laws too? Perhaps you should each walk about this town when the sun goes down by yourself and tell me at the end of the day how you feel. People are no longer shopping in this city because they do not feel safe to do so. They are taking their resources elsewhere, and it's hurting our businesses. What has happened in the last 2 years that we have seen such a drastic change in this city? You guys are turning away constituents, taxpayers, and law-abiding citizens' voices. Every city has flaws, but not to this degree. People lock their doors when they come through our town because they were afraid. The residents of this city would like free utilities for a year because we work hard to pay for our stuff, and we apparently are working hard to pay for theirs. This is not about human hate. This is about hating what they are doing to themselves, to us, and to our environment. Thank you.
If a person doesn't have a home, that's foundational to their well-being. I mean, how many people do you know that have a substance use disorder that live in a home? They're an alcoholic that live in a home. I know state legislators that have substance use disorders that live in homes. We're not talking about them.